Hello and welcome to this astrological learning session. Thank you for tuning in and thank you for finding me. If you are new to my channel, welcome. Please smash the subscribe button. It really helps me out. And please go and visit my website if you would like a personal birth chart reading where you send in your details, your date of birth, time, location, etc. with 3 questions, and I go ahead and do a recorded reading tailored for you where I look at your questions and I look at your birth chart and I explain all of the placements in the houses and give you a very, very good foundation that will have a lot of depth to it. So that being said, go ahead and book me for an astrological chart reading. You'll be getting a link sent back to you and you get to keep that recording and you can come back to it and listen to it anytime that you so choose. So I am continuing the houses series. This is a series where I am explaining all of the houses in astrology and you get a good foundation, a good breakdown of all of the placements and how the signs kind of play out through the houses. So today we are looking at the first house. Okay, so when we think of the first house, I automatically think of Aries straight away. I think of something pushing into the world that wants to be here. It is about self-identity and it is the first house. So in astrology, the houses go round from, in order, they go from Aries, Taurus, Gemini, etc. And it goes right back, right around. All right. So what we're looking at here is the foundation. So this is very tightly connected in the first house, is often called the house of the self, the ascendant, or the rising sign. So it's a starting point for your natal chart. Okay, so the rising sign is often in or is in the first house. So when someone asks you, can you guess my rising sign? What they're kind of really asking you is, can you guess where my first house will be? All right. So in astrology, our sun sign is our outer world. It's how the world sees us. Our rising is the lens that we see the world through. So in this world, it's very, very important for you to have an understanding about who you are. All right. So I have mentioned this before in other heavy chats that when we have a person that has a very weak or confused knowledge of themselves, a very, very confused identity, we're going to have a person that isn't going to be able to do much in this world. And we know that in the darker aspects of the occult and what's happening with a lot of the wokey culture and things like that, we have this deliberate confusion put over people so they're confused about who they are. This makes them easily controllable and weak. Now, when we look at Aries and we're talking about the first house, this is strength. This is someone who is very secure in how they see themselves, because the core themes within the first house are all about the identity, the I am, I will be here, I know who I am. So when someone knows who they are, and it's that first house, that core foundation of someone, they know what they want, because what you want is an extension of who you are. That's why after all these years of doing readings, when I meet people that say, oh, I don't know what I want, you're useless, you're fucked. You need to go away and you need to go and figure that out, because no one else can figure that out for you. You have to know who you are. And so I would often say in this life is not about finding yourself. that would imply that there's like a version of you that exists that you've got to locate, like a treasure hunt or some shit. Life is about creating yourself as you go along, and all the different versions of you that have to come and go for you to have your expansion. And what I'm really referring to when I say versions of you, I'm talking about like the heavy stuff, the breakdowns, the breakthroughs, the dark nights of the souls, those heavy Saturn returns, those heavy Chiron returns, which I've talked about on this channel as well. That's how we figure out who we are, by being broken down, rebuilding ourselves. Okay, so the core foundation of you is it's in your personality. But remember, your personality is not your soul. Okay, your soul is your soul. Your personality is how the soul expresses itself. It's your persona. Okay, so when we look at the first house, this is about how others kind of like perceive you. You know, this can be a social mask. You know, this can be how you sit in your physical body. How do you feel in your appearance? Are you confident when you look in the mirror? Do you love yourself? Do you look in the mirror and see a lot of flaws and look at the negative aspects of yourself, which can often happen with a Virgo in the first house? You know, so as we look at the signs, and I'll give you some examples, what sign sits in your first house can really do a number on you. You know, if you've got a stellium around a particular sign in your chart, this will amplify that sign. Okay, so we know in astrology, in a chart, it's all frequencies and angles and degrees and squares and nodes and orbs. It's quite complex. That's why it's best to just go get an astrological reading done where someone looks at all of those things and takes them into account. Okay, so quite often you can actually come across some people that may not really have much of a placement in their first house. It might be like down at a really, really low degree. But at least we know that their rising sign will be in their first house. The lens that they see the world through will be affected by that first house placement. So I hope I'm not confusing you too much, because I know this can get a little bit like, what is he talking about? But just, I don't want to confuse you, because that's not what I'm trying to do here. But I just want you to think of the first house as when cells merge in the womb and they form a baby, a fetus, and it comes into the world. It's the structural, physical expression of the body. A lot of physicality happens in the first house as we move into that second house, where it's about wealth and comfort and home and materiality. The first house is the baby. Aries is the baby. The darker aspects of an Aries person is a petulant child that screams and has temper tantrums when it doesn't get what it wants, because it's a baby. A baby can't understand anyone else's needs outside of its own needs. That's why a lot of babies are crying. When you go out in a public place and a baby's going, you know, that type of thing. I just hurt my voice when I did that. I just woke up, by the way, apologies. Okay, so think of it that way. So a big aspect of like an unregulated, or what I would call an NPC, a non-playing character. When I refer to non-playing characters in astrology, what I'm talking about here is someone that lives purely mostly in their sun sign. So they don't really have a range of access to their internal world. They're not connected to themselves. And if they're not connected to themselves, it's impossible for a human to connect to others. If you can't understand you, then your level of connection and depth to others will be weak, because we can only receive something and understand another person and integrate another person into us as deeply as we have integrated ourselves first. That's why it's really important to have a very strong understanding about who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what is your style, what is your theme, you know, what are you into, what do you like to do. And I'm not just talking about like someone asking you, what do you do with yourself for a living? Because that's just that's society's like That's a capitalistic way of looking at a human and reducing them to like, okay, you make this much money, this is how much respect I'm going to give you. Because that's how most people actually will interact with you, okay? So we're talking about the persona within yourself. So this is your inner instincts, your basic reactions to things, how you enter the world, how you enter situations. When that baby came out of the womb, how it entered. Sorry, we got cut off there. I'm back. Yes, so it is how you enter the world. So it is your persona's roots that come forth into the world. And your rising sign is really a very powerful aspect to your chart because it dominates and sets the tone for how you are received in the world based on how you see the world. So without getting too heavy, I want you to think of it like this, how I'm looking at it, like, say, for example, look at the thumbnail of this video that I've chosen today for this podcast. It's a mirror. Someone's holding a mirror of themselves outwards to the world. So how you are perceived by others, or how you look, how you talk, how you walk, the movement patterns that you do from your personality, that shapes the muscle formation in your body. So if you're really fit and active and very motivated and you look after yourself, that outcome of your self-love will be received and projected outwards to the world for others to see. And so based on that projection, that is how people are going to react to you and receive you. So it's basically me saying, and this is very heavy because when we look at a rising sign, there is an aspect when we look at the first house that is fundamentally going to govern your whole life. So I have talked about this before, getting a little bit deeper into the first house in relation to this. Say, for example, you're very, very good looking. You're a very, very sexy, beautiful person. That is going to have you go through the world with people interacting with you in a way that they desire you, or in a way that people will resent you and punish you for being attractive if they wish that they were attractive. So you'll go around in the world making people feel very, very insecure and very, very threatened if you're a good-looking person. You'll be something that people will want to consume or fuck so that they can feel better about themselves if your sexual marketplace value and your projection is higher. Okay, because humans are hypergamous in nature. When we talk about SMV, sexual marketplace value, you can go back and re-listen to one of the videos or find it here on my channel because I did a video just purely explaining hypergamy and how that works with humans. So say, for example, so how people receive you in the world will be your projection. All right, without our projection, we're nothing. It's just like me making art. Without putting it in the world, no one would know that it's there. Without projection of being seen, it can't integrate into the world or have a place in the world, right? So the other side of that is you are very unattractive. You've got a very, very average looking face. Your physical physique is very weak. You look very sick. You're very scrawny. If you're a man and you have no muscle, if you're really short, if you've got a very little dick, if your face looks like a smashed pie, I'm being very blunt here, or if you're really a great big fat girl, that's not going to be received well. So how others interact with you based on your first house rising projection in the physical form, because that's what the first house is. It's the base, physical body, the outer level of how others see you. That persona will be received in a negative way as well, where people will not respect you. You will feel invisible. You will not feel desired. So that's what the first house does. I know that sounds really hard, but both sides of the pendulum theory, and you can research this. The pendulum theory is the girl that's really attractive that everyone wants to fuck. but no one wants to date. No one wants to, they want to date her so they can have the power of it, but they don't want to have intellectual conversations with her about her life and her trauma and what was on Game of Thrones kind of episode last week kind of thing. They're not interested in her soul. But on the other side, the person that is not attractive conventionally in society is also alone, is also undesired, and that's very, very painful as well. So extremes within the first house, if they are not received well, will affect the future of a human in this world. Because why? Because humans are an interconnected species. Okay, so I know that's really heavy and hard to hear, but it's the truth, all right? So the first house rules your projection. So it's the foundation of you coming into the world, building a personality, building an aspect to yourself that can be out in the world. So depending on what sign your first house or rising sign sits in is essentially setting up, where your ascendant is, it's in your chart. It's basically setting up your self-image of how you will be received in the world by others. So, and how that's representing, how that's coming across. So I hope that made sense. So yes, so it's pretty intense. Like the first house is pretty important. Your rising sign is pretty important. My rising is in Sagittarius and my sun is in Sagittarius. My Mercury is Sagittarius. There's a lot of 9th house placements and 12th house placements. So me being received in the world, like I came across as a kid as very spiritual, very aloof, hated being told what to do, very strong character, very strong thoughts, very strong sense of self-awareness. Fire signs have that in spades. And very this is how I feel about something. I'm not doing the, fire sign ascendants don't really mince words. Same with a Scorpio rising. There's no point in wasting time if we can't get down to the nitty-gritty stuff immediately. Capricorn can be that way as well, a little bit. So it's essentially having a very strong formation of self and a knowledge of self is really kind of imperative, especially to living a life of meaning, because an unexamined life is not really a life worth living. Okay, so I know this, and that's ultimately, if you're listening to my channel and you're watching my videos, self-examination is, it's everything, because that's what spirituality is, mastery of self, right? So you have to have self-actualization to be able to interact with the world and interface with the world. Otherwise, you're just going to be operating from your sun sign, which is just your physical appearance, which won't have much depth to it. So what sign your first house is sitting in is going to show us how that's going to play out in the first house. So giving you an example before, so just starting from scratch, I'll just go over them and I'll give you examples. If your first house is Aries rising, that's Mars, that's combative. It's very direct, it's very bold. You're going to have a very assertive personality. You'll be very spontaneous, very quick quick to act on things, quick action. Sometimes Aries in the first house can be a little bit impulsive, all right? They can jump into things without thinking them through necessarily first. Aries in the first house will be like a leader and it will be quite competitive and very much the spirit of the pioneer. Physiologically, I have mentioned before, your rising sign or your first house will dictate what you look like physiologically. That's why when I meet people and I pick out their star signs when I have clients, and even I have another things that I go to that I work with people and stuff, I'm able to pick their sign because I look at their rising. I'm looking for their rising sign because humans look like their rising sign more than their sun sign. So if it was an Aries, it's very like athletic, very tall. Usually they're quite strong legs, sharp facial features, sharp eyes, fiery expression, that type of thing. If it's, say, Taurus rising, Taurus, your first house sits in Taurus. And by the way, sometimes people will come to me and their first house is kind of what I would call an empty house. It's a very, very low degree. We always have to look at where everything else is sitting in terms of its degrees. So if you've got really, really high degrees in other parts of your chart, then that's the part that will dominate your self. All right. But that's why you need an astrologer to unpack your chart, because your self-image is important. And if an aspect of a house is empty, then other parts of your chart will dominate or make up for that part of yourself. I hope that made sense. So your first house in Taurus would be someone who's kind of like beauty, nature, more calm, more stable. That's a very fixed energy in Taurus first house. So that's very like sensible, doesn't jump into things through, very quickly, quite more grounded, more patient. And, a Taurus first houser person would prefer, a regular schmegular projection. They don't want to go over the top and be, look at me, like a fifth house would be, like a Leo. They're more like, modest, clothing on, very sensual, classy. Okay. Their appearance will be very solid. And in the physical appearance of the first house for a Taurus, that is someone with a very strong neck. The neck always gives away the physical form of the Taurus. And they have very soft eyes, a little bit like a doe, like a fawn, like a cow or a fawn. So physiologically, a Taurus rising person is someone that has very soft features around the eyelashes. And that's how you can kind of spot a Taurus person. Okay. The first house in Gemini or a Gemini rising, that's someone who's very curious, very socially adaptable. That's a very quick thinking person that has a real thirst for knowledge, and they're very playful. They're very flirty, very lively, very witty. Their eyes will be darting around all the time. This type of physicality in a first house in Gemini is someone that will usually looks very elven in the face, like an elf. Like think of like the Lord of the Rings, those elves, the ones with like the long blonde hair. That's Gemini rising. They are very twitchy and fidgety. They can't sit still. Their hands are always twitching and moving like a cat. Cat energy is Gemini energy. It can land on its feet. It's quick. It can maneuver itself into positions very, very quickly. And they're very quick at communication. They can cover a lot of topics very, very quick. They'll talk very, very quick. They'll interrupt your conversation very, very quickly. But they're great at multitasking. So first house Gemini people can juggle a lot of balls at one time without dropping them. And the accuracy of a first house in Gemini person is very strong. So they'll be able to do a lot of things, and the quality of what they're doing will be very good. Okay? They usually look a lot younger than physiologically, they look a lot younger than what they are. All right? So a slim, youthful look and very expressive hands. Now, with a Gemini rising, a Libra rising, or an Aquarius rising, that's air. So air will be amplified by whatever else is around it in its chart. So just remember that whatever is dominating someone's chart in terms of its degrees and placements and how often it shows up in their chart, for example, if it is a stellium, that will dictate how the first house is projecting itself, if any of it's sitting in the first house. I hope that made sense. Okay, so let's have a look at, so what have we got? Cancer. Cancer in the first house. So if you are a Cancer rising, that is a more sensitive, nurturing type of person. This type of person is very empathetic, very intuitive, and they tend to have a rounder face. I have done a series on how to spot the signs, so please go and have a look at that, because I give examples of the physiological structure and look of people in the signs, so you'll get an example there. But yeah, as a Cancer person, Cancer rising person ages, their head tends to get larger and their neck starts to get scrawnier. I know I've noticed that with a lot of the Cancerian men, and they age like fine wine. They, Sagittarius and Cancer age very well, very much like the daddy archetype. Yes, when they have white in their beard or white hair, it's actually very attractive. It's actually quite sexy in a way. And the women, Cancer rising people, if it's a strong placement, generally will always be in some way a parent in this lifetime. So that's also connected to, the soul contract. And I guess astrology, like all that a chart reading is someone reading out your soul contract. Your astrological chart is your soul contract. So the first house is just the part of the contract, really, as an occultist, that's showing me what physiologically is happening with you and your projection. So if it is a Cancer rising, that's someone who is very protective of their personal boundaries. They're not going to give out, the keys to the kingdom straight away. You have to build up to them. You have to get to know them. And they may not ask you to come over to their house a lot, at first. If a Cancer rising person lets you into their life to meet their family or to come over to their house and let you into their world, then that's a very strong sign that they like you. They are very protective, and Cancer rising people are all about home and security and assessing risk-taking. Cancer people they assess risks. They align themselves with things usually that are stronger or bigger than them. Like a crab would scurry into and lock itself very tightly into like a little nook in a rock, because the rock is providing safety and security to the crab from sea creatures that would seek to eat the crab or sea enemies. So Cancer rising people, they are very home-focused people, much like Taurus. If they could just stay home and snack and cuddle up on the couch and watch movies, that's a Cancer rising. If they're not doing some level of renovation on their house, Cancer people are always in some level of renovation with their house. And they can get a little bit hoardy as well. Very secretive around money, Cancer rising people. And appearance-wise, they have a rounder, softer face. Usually it's a lighter coloured eye colour for the Cancers, a lot of them. And they have a very gentle demeanour, but they have a sadness to them, like Pisces does. Physically, they have a bit of a sadness to them, I've noticed, in the eyes. All right, so let's have a look. So you could actually also be subject to mood disorders as well. Cancer rising in the first house, I do see a lot of bipolar playing out. So them learning to regulate their moods based on, their reactivity to things is one of the things that they have to master in this life. Okay, so Leo in the first house, a Leo rising person, that is radiant. It's strong, it's bold, it's got an aspect that is very regal. Regal, like reds, rich colors, architecture from a time period that is very exquisite. They have a real interest in royalty. A lot of them are connected, like they like royalty. They like the status a Leo rising person refuses to be shamed. Okay, so money is important to Leos. They know how to make it and they know how to spend that money. All right, how they're projecting outwards to the world is very, very important to a Leo. They must have an audience. A Leo rising person is very much confident in themselves, so it's a beautiful thing to behold. A really well integrated Leo is someone who isn't dominating others, lets people have their moment. We all know Leos. It's all about them. It's the Leo show. Leos will often look at something very competitively and they'll be like, I don't see what this has to do with me. Yeah, they're a bit like that. And if they can get over themselves, and it's like, have your moment, Leo rising. Have your moment. Oh, honey, have your moment and chill and sit down and let everyone else have their turn. Leo rising people can be very bossy and dominating in relationships. They're leaders. Okay, so Leo rising people love their hair. A lot of Leo rising people, for women, a lot of them end up as like hairdressers, and it's all about playing with their hair, brushing their hair, losing their hair as a Leo rising male as they age, like the male pattern bald gene or whatever, that can really damage their confidence. So a lot of Leo men will, get lots of tattoos, get the muscles, get the car. It's all about their projection. I will say Leo rising people make very, very good friends, very loyal. They're there for you. They really stick it out. Leos are actually one of the best. I'm a little bit biased, but Leos are actually, yes, they are one of the best signs in the zodiac if they're well integrated, okay? Keyword integrated, from their darker aspects. They're very proud. So they've got lots of pride and they are very warm, and the sun brings life. So yeah, it's like they're naturally a performer. And a Leo rising person in the first house will generally have relationships where everything is kind of centered around them. They put themselves in the middle of everything. They've got a very strong a presence and a very strong posture as well. How they conduct themselves, how they hold themselves in their body is very important. Standing up straight, being confident, chest out, shoulders back. Don't be shy, don't slouch, speak clearly, be direct. Bright eyes, big smile. That's Leo rising, first house. Okay, an example of first house placement in Virgo is obviously, it's that second part of the mercurial Mercury. Gemini has the curiosity that killed the cat. And Virgo Mercury is dissecting, analyzing, scientific investigation, very detail orientated. These people tend to gain power by correcting others, like a teacher. There is a Virgo aspect that is a teacher, and the darker aspect of a Virgo rising person is they don't start things. They're not very creative. They are problem solvers, and they are good at figuring out what we don't want or need in the world. So a lot of them will gain power by critiquing others or controlling others. And if this isn't not integrated well, then if they're an insecure Virgo person, they will take out their insecurities by knocking the wind out of the sails of other people. Virgo rising and Virgo sun people are very dangerous to fire signs when they're in their infantile stages, because they will knock their confidence out of them and beat them and browbeat them, and it can be very bad. But Virgo is like Virgo energy in a rising is like a sex worker or a stripper or a pole dancer. It's something that it's like the birth of Venus, right? It's beauty, perfection. You can admire me, but don't touch me. Don't come near me. It can be frigid, okay? It can be very self-protecting, right? So rising Virgo people can be very much obsessed with self-improvement within themselves, and they can have a very unhealthy thought pattern about, unhealthy thought patterns about their own self. Appearance-wise, physiologically, they're very like a doll. A lot of them are very much like Frieza from Dragon Ball Z, that type of thing. Very clean, very neat, very refined, and controlled. That type of controlled movement pattern. Very good gymnasts and needing routine and structure. They have a thirst for knowledge, and that's like the scientist, okay? That's a Virgo rising person, is very analytical. Their mind needs to rest because sometimes it can just run over running, like spinning their wheels. Gemini can do that too. All right, so the first house in Libra, a Libra rising, this is more of a harmonious Venus energy. They're very diplomatic. They're the peacekeepers. So a lot of them are like Switzerland. They're in the middle. A lot of Libra rising and Libra sun people are very much like people pleasers. They go along with things that they really shouldn't. Britney Spears had a Virgo rising. I was looking at her chart the other day, and a lot of problems can happen with Libra rising people because they don't know when to say no, and they let people use them in a way because they don't assert enough self-image. Libra, Gemini, and Cancer can have this problem where they copy other people. And they'll watch a movie, then they want to be the person in the movie. Like a Gemini will do that. A Libra will not so much start things, but they kind of grab onto the fur of others that are starting things. This can happen a lot. There is a lot of creativity as well within a Libra rising person. They have a very strong knack for an aesthetic. Aesthetics are very important. So things have to be presented well. They have to look well. They have to be, tidy, organized, and appear to be well put together. So Libra rising people are very much in the learning vibe as well. A lot of them are about teachers and it's all about information and sharing information. This happens. There's a teacher aspect to Libra. They're very good at mediating things, but the problem is they're not disagreeable. Libra rising people, their weakness is they're not agreeable. They're too agreeable, in other words, yeah. So seeking fairness and listening to everyone's point of view and trying to keep everything neutral and happy is actually not choosing a side and being loyal to that team. So a lot of them have trouble sustaining long-term relationships because they can't commit to something on a level that is full body connection. They have to be kind of in the middle. All right. So they seeking balance, appearance wise, they are very good, like in posture, a lot of them, and they can be quite elegant, and the colors gold and white come across with a Libra rising person all the time. Think of like crisp white sheets on a bed. That's a Libra energy. Okay, first house in Scorpio. Scorpio rising, this is like Pluto and Mars type of thing. This is a very magnetic person. It's always in the eyes. They have what I call the serial killer eyes. They are very mysterious. A Scorpio rising person is very powerful, very penetrating, very strategic, very strong willpower and endurance. And a lot of Scorpio rising people can be a little bit culty in their approach to getting things done. They can manipulate people to get what they want. Scorpions are very manipulative. And Scorpios deal in traps. Scorpio rising people can lay traps for people. Okay, Sagittarius' worst nightmare. But they are very powerful, and they've got a very strong attraction to deep plutonic things. So like I said earlier, the first house in Scorpio doesn't want to talk about fluffy things. It's very much interested in intense conversations. There's a very strong intensity to a Scorpio rising. They are about controlled movements and very piercing frequencies and energies that they project outwards. Strong attraction to the underworld, to sex, death, rebirth, regeneration, and more of the darker aspects of life, like Hades, that type of thing. Hades and Persephone, think of that. Okay, the first house in Sagittarius, so that's more of a Jupiter, that's optimism. So these people are very athletic, very philosophical. They love new ideas, they love exploration, they love travel. They can be a little bit of a Peter Pan. First house in Sagittarius rising is an inner child. It's a wrestle between the beast of very taboo, forbidden fruit touching sexually, and the wisdom of an old man with a pipe and a beard, sitting at a fireplace or outside camping, being a storyteller. Very enthusiastic though, but very, very blunt. First house in Sagittarius is blunt, and sometimes to them just telling the truth can be like clubbing a baby seal. Very no filter, real, raw, blunt. And that's just how a Sag rising person is. That's me. I have a Sag rising. Friendly though, friendly and lively. And usually a longer shaped face with very kind of straight teeth, like Britney Spears has that type of Sagittarius face. That's a good example of a Sag. But yeah, and as a Sagittarius ages in their rising, for women, their hips get very big and their thighs get very big, very thick legs that are designed to live life, climb mountains, and excessive. They don't know when to stop eating. They don't know when to stop talking. It's just everything is very excessive. It's very difficult to have relationships with high degree placements in the first house of Sagittarius in a person for the first 30 years of their life. Their life will be very stop, start with a lot of different projects and relationships. A lot of situationships happen with the Sagittarius in the first house rising. All right, Capricorn in the first house is someone who is very serious, very disciplined. They want to know, how much does that cost? How do I get that? What do I have to do? I'll work hard for you. That type of thing. Ambitious. They're level-based. These are people that are very determined, and we know that Saturn rules trials and tribulations. So anyone with a rising in Saturn has to really deal with a lot of upheaval in their life. They are very mature for their age, and they do age backwards. Okay, so they start off very serious, like the Capricorn sun. Capricorn rising people are very they age as they get older, they get less fixated on things, and the seriousness in them starts to just mellow a little bit. They're very responsible, very reserved. So it's like the curious case of Benjamin Button. How he starts off really old and then ages backwards. That's Capricorn. Very persistent as well. Very strong angular facial features for the rising. Very strong bone structures, and usually a larger shaped skull, no matter what their ethnicity. That's how I always know I'm looking at a Capricorn rising, is the shape and the size of their cranium. Same with the Aquarians. So Aquarius rising in the first house, this is a very unique intellectual person. They are absolutely unconventional, very difficult to sometimes know where you stand with them. They're very aloof. They could leave you on red for weeks and not think about it or understand why you might be mad. They are very independent in the way that they think, very forward thinking and rule breaking. So they have a rebellion to them. A lot of them are activists. A lot of them have this thing about saving the world, healing the world, fixing the world, because the rising in Aquarius is the opposite to Leo. Leo is about the self. Aquarius is about everybody else. It's community based, okay? Very quirky, very distinctive, and a very unique style. Think of the show like Aeon Flux, that animated show. She would be an Aquarian. Very sexual, very gender bender type of thing. Aquarius rising people have a way of making people feel a bit uncomfortable at times. People don't really know how to take them. Very unusual, quirky style. A lot of them look very alien-like, very googly in the eyes. Okay? Think of like Trinity from The Matrix. You know, she would be an Aquarius rising energy to me. You know, slick, a little bit androgynous. Okay? Black, tight, vinyl, leather, pants. Yeah, that type of thing. All right, the first house in Pisces, rising. This is a Neptunian Pisces. They're very dreamy. They're very imaginative, very spiritual. 12th house is, the ruler of Pisces is the 12th house. So it's like someone who's got a foot somewhere else in the world. They feel everything. Rising in Pisces is an empath. Someone who needs to have a mystical presence. And they don't do well in this world. A lot of Pisces rising people, depending on the degree it sits in their chart, they're mermaids. You know, and to me, when I look at a mermaid, the construct of a mermaid is something that isn't real. So there's a very strong problem with dealing with reality, and then the reality that they want something to be in their head. So this sign usually gravitates more towards stronger people, like a Scorpion. You know, Pisces and Scorpio, that relationship dynamic is as old as time. Okay? So the Little Mermaid, they go for things that are not real. Ariel is a mermaid. Eric is a human. Rising Pisces people are very fluid, very ethereal, magical, all right? Aloof. They don't do well with structures. They don't do well showing up on time. They can be a perpetual victim. You know, a lot of Pisces people are victims of situations. There's always something happening that is where they are hard done by, or someone did something to them, or someone pushed a boundary past its level. Pisces rising people have to establish boundaries and hold them to exist in this world. It's a very, very hard placement to be a first house in Pisces. To have an ascendant rising in Pisces is very, very difficult. They will go for people that are emotionally unavailable, and they will go for people that are like avoid attachers, like I can fix him type of thing. They end up getting hurt a lot, and a lot of them have a lot of extreme mental health problems as well. I do see a lot of people on the spectrum with high Pisces rising or Pisces moon and suns a lot in their degrees. But yeah, so I hope that this has given you a really good example of the first house. So really look at where your first house is sitting. What sign is it playing out in your ascending? Because it's really going to set up the theme of your personality and your chart and your life. But yeah, it's been awesome talking about this. I hope that you've enjoyed this chat and this lesson. And yeah, if you'd like to book me for an astrological chart reading, I'd love to look at where your rising sign is sitting. I will conduct it and send it to you so you can upload it and you'll have a reading that you can keep forever. Lots and lots of love, and I will see you in the next video. This was me explaining the first house in astrology. All right. Bye, bye, bye.